What is up, you guys? I am back with another video today. I am Nastya Shutka if you do not know me. I haven't actually uploaded for a hot minute and I do apologize. I always say I'm going to be consistent, but consistency fails me. Or I at least fail myself with consistency, but that is fine, whatever. We are here, we are back. And today I'm going to be showing you how I have made my stitched cherry piece. Now, this isn't actually the first time that I've been making a stitch piece, although it will be the first time that you guys see the process of making a stitched piece. I have actually done two before this. One was a traditional Ukrainian symbol, which I did for my degree show, and the second one was a watermelon, which I will in fact have a video for you guys to see at some point in the year, because I am going to be making a second one with a different colour scheme, which I should have had finished last year, but as you can tell, consistency is not my thing and I don't have enough time to ever do what I want to do. So I didn't finish the second one, and there were also so many problems because a laser cutter just always decides to fail on me. But that's fine, it comes with the process. We're just used to these setbacks, but we will always prevail. So I will have a video out this year, so hold on to your seats, make sure you are prepared. I will let you know when that's out. Now, the cherry is like a national berry, but it is definitely a flavour that is very common in our country. And I will say the sad thing about the UK is that we're not very privy to cherry. Cherry is not like the flavour palette for everyone, and that is fine, but you know, everyone's wrong, you should be having cherry flavoured items. So in my mind I was like, what comes after a watermelon? And I was like, cherries. Now, with the watermelon piece and with my symbol piece, I actually did them all very square, because obviously I used the laser cutters to cut the format out, so they're very boxy. With the second one I also made a net, but I curved the edge to sort of experiment. Now with this piece, I wanted to go a step further. I wanted to see if I could make a fully curved piece. So obviously 2 halves of a cherry, and we figured it out. Obviously the technique is a little bit different because I don't get to stitch onto plastic, which I have learned is a lot different from stitching onto fabric. And now I thought I was quite good at cross stitch, but fabric has humbled me. I cannot lie. Before we get onto the whole process and me explaining how we're doing this, because this is going to be a very long video of how I've done this, the first thing I usually do is I go into my little folder where I save all Ukrainian patterns that I've like kind of collected throughout the years and that I like, and I pick one that I think will best suit this project. And then I start editing the colours to fit the vision that I'm trying to make, because obviously there's a traditional colour palette, but those colour palettes don't always suit what I'm trying to make. And for these cherry pieces, I sort of modernize them a little bit so that the colour palette suits the fruit that I'm trying to make. With that said, let's get started with the video. When I start any of these stitch projects, I always start out with my main colour. So if I have a black outline or a white outline, that's the colour that I start off with, just because I can then lay the entire foundation of the pattern onto the fabric that I'm going to be using or onto the plastic. And then from there, I can start inputting the colours, sort of colouring in the shape that I have made. My problem as of right now, but I don't like that you can see the white or like the cream of the fabric underneath. I've been doing embroidery on plastic for like the past year or two, so I just usually paint the back with black. So I'm thinking if I dye the fabric black underneath, the red will, like all the colours will show up better. So from the get-go, like I said, I've been doing plastic stitching for most of my time. Now, moving on to fabric has been a very interesting experience because it is completely different. As you saw just now, I didn't like having the white background. It was very obvious that the stitch account that I was using was not enough. So either for the next time that when I do this project, I'm going to increase the thread amount, which would be up to 4 because I usually do 3. But in this case, because I had already started and I did like a day's work already, I didn't want to have to restitch everything, so I committed to my 3 stitch count, but I decided to paint the back. Now, to be honest, again, if I was to do this again, I would probably have made the colour that I was dyeing it darker. I used India ink mixed with water, and it took a few layers for me to get the colour that I thought would have been correct. And I did commit at this point because I thought it was good enough of a darkness for the background, but again, I would probably have made it even darker because it's sort of a bluey grey rather than a black. so the color difference is still quite obvious. I did buy quite a lot of fabric from the beginning, so when I was doing this stitching, I didn't realize how annoying it would be to have this excess fabric in my way, so I just cut it off, so I didn't have to worry about it. On to the star of the show. These styrofoam balls were absolutely perfect. So I actually ended up buying 2 different sizes, 30 centimeters in diameter and this one, which I think was actually 20 centimeters in diameter. And initially it was giving me a hard time with cutting it, so I've used multiple different saws to try get through it. Eventually I just opted for a regular saw, a bit tedious, but it did the job. At the start of the video, I gave you a bit of a sneak peek of how I stitched the first piece of fabric for the first half of the styrofoam. Now for this half, I'm going to give you a bit of a better look into what I did. So I started off with drawing the circle this time. I was more prepared, finding the area in which I actually had to stitch. Then I dyed it again into that grey blue, which I apparently love, and then began the stitching. So this entire video is going to be so much stitching, but I do think it is a very beautiful process to see how it went from a very blank slate to a very colourful sheet of fabric. So as you can see, I'm doing that outline again, making my base set and ready. Throughout this video, you're also going to witness just how much YouTube content I ended up going through to actually finish this project. Like, I was non-stop binging Good Mythical Kitchen. It was the only show that was getting me through this project, if I'm honest with you. So I have been stitching for a while and I've only just realized something. It looks all good, it looks all clean. And then, what is that? I missed a freaking stitch. That is so annoying. I will say, the thing that was the bane of my existence throughout this project was the fact that I was stitching a circular shape. So I had to sort of guesstimate where I wanted the cutoff point to be. And because of how the sort of embroidery hoop was, I had to be very specific in what colours I could put in that sort of area that I had access to, and then move it around. So the stitching process actually took a lot longer just for the sheer fact that I had to move around the embroidery hoop. It was a very weird experience for me coming from having stitched on plastic. We can finally move on with this piece. It has been a very long time. It has been stressing me the hell out. We're gonna try make that into this. I'm gonna try stretch it and make it nice and spherical. But overall, I'm quite proud of how this has come out. Now, I'm gonna take a bit of a different approach than I did the last time, because with this one, I forgot that styrofoam is a bit of a sensitive material. It's very easy to ruin. And so what I did, I made the mistake of having Uhu glue and putting it in the center, because Uhu tacks really well to fabric. It caused a dent in my hoop. You can't really tell, thankfully it's not that big of an issue. So we're gonna avoid Uhu. I'm gonna use a Mod Podge, whatever I had laying around, because I used it to settle it in the back. And although it doesn't tack like crazy, it stays in place enough to stretch it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my time, I'm gonna wet the whole styrofoam ball, and I'm using this pin to keep the center point. I'm gonna use the Mod Podge and I'm gonna like cover the whole thing and try flatten it. So let's just try this. But if I pull this back, we get a paintbrush that I don't care about. All the mistakes that can happen in a piece, I always somehow manage to make them. A lot of people say you measure once, you gotta Actually, I forgot the saying, but it's something along the lines of like you measure once and you gotta redo the whole thing, and then you measure 3 times, and I'm really bad at sayings. Whatever it is, it's something like that. Here's the question, is it even centered? Because if it's not, we're a bit screwed here. See, this is my point, like what is the best? Oh, it kind of looks cute though. Looks like a little pillow. It's like an empanada. I've really stitched so much. I could have saved myself so much effort not stitching all of this. Again, I know I've done this once technically with the first ball, but I did it a bit ago now. So I've kind of forgotten how the hell I did it. Pin that in place. We get more Mod Podge.
I'm trying to make her snatched. I'm trying to cinch her in, make her nice and tight so that there are no ripples all over.
So now we have the first one, and we're gonna wait for this to dry. We have our second one. So there is my 2 stitch bows, and I'm surprised they're both actually like quite centered. Okay, let's clap. Please do subscribe so that you can actually keep up to date with the things that I'm going to be doing on this channel, because they are going to be very exciting and hopefully at least unique, I'd like to think. So do come along, come with the journey, join the gang. I know we're quite small right now, but hopefully there'll be more of us at some point. Also click the bell notification, and I know you haven't seen anything yet, but comment and like so that I can keep doing this because it's fun. Thank you.
So now we will be moving on to making the stem, which was actually a lot more difficult than I initially anticipated it to be. So I had all of my measurements online, so I used Illustrator to figure out the dimensions that I wanted from the cherries to the actual stem so that the proportion was correct. When I put this onto paper and I used those exact measurements, there was a few things that actually didn't quite add up, which I should have seen coming. I was going from a sort of completely 2D model into a 3D sculpt. So not having actually accounted for that, there were a few mistakes. We sorted those out. And coming up to the clay, I also think that I probably could have done by using a different clay. I still managed to do it. It worked out, and actually the texture from the clay actually benefited the texture that I think you would see on a stem. So it gave it a bit more of an organic feel rather than feeling quite plasticky and smooth. So I am quite happy with that, but I do think that I could have picked a less fragile material. The process consisted of me adding on what was missing with the clay, drying it in the oven, as I do find it easier to actually work on top of dry clay, because if it's wet, it's all wet together and it's all mushy. I can't do what I need to do. So I like having it nice and dry. And then I always sand off what I think is excessive and I don't need, and then just add more.
Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be doing is, as you can see, I finished the stems and that's just rolling away. And as you can see, there's a bit of like jankiness on it, ragged sort of bits. But I'm going to take a knife and sort of shape it, get it to the size that I want it to be. So here we go. Literally 2 seconds in and I've already done fucked. Whatever, we move. I'll just fill it in later. Okay, we're gonna change plans because this is clearly not working for me, because now I have a crack. I'm not happy. I have to redo that. So moving on to the next step, and we're going to try paint this in a green that I still think is quite earthy toned and nice. Let's get to it. So that's what it looks like with a bit of dry brushing, just like one layer. And this on this side is what it looks like without. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to take this, now that I finished painting it, and I'm going to use matte Mod Podge to kind of cover it all so that it stays nice and solid.
So now that we have all of our components done, we actually are moving on to the laser cutting portion and to the assembly of our piece. So as usual, the laser cutter was not my best friend on this occasion, and I promise it's not a reflection of my skill. I genuinely actually can use the laser cutter, and I've made some really cool things using it, but for some reason, this specific machine hates me. It has a vendetta, I'm sure.
Okay, if you're gonna hear my dog in the background going, he's old, I'm sorry. So this is a very long video already, but I finally managed to laser cut my base. So it's made up of 3 pieces, so hopefully I'll have it bloody finished by this year. It's been taking forever. Can you see that? It's nice and shimmery. Take this, and then in the middle, just put that down like that.
At this point, I'm hiding a few flaws. I realized that once I actually stuck the ball onto the platform that I had for it, you could still see the colored cream fabric underneath. And obviously that's not the aesthetic we were going for, so I tried to color match as best as possible to not only the actual sphere, but also to the base. I seem to genuinely make this comment about every single project that I'm making, but this project gave me such a headache. This material, acrylic plastic, is awful for drilling, so not only was it difficult to drill through and I couldn't get a proper hole in, it also decided to completely lose a screw in there, which just decided to bounce out, and I couldn't get it out. So I had to just leave it in there. There's a screw that is broken that will forever be in this piece as a memory to my faults with this project, because oh my god, what a nightmare this was. I literally tried to drill it out in the opposing way to try push it out. I also tried using pliers, but my pliers were not holding onto them in any format. So like I said, it just has to stay there. Now I'm just grabbing my Uhu glue and gluing everything down.
Before, when I did my watermelon piece, I made another one straight away, but the place that I did it at had a really faulty laser cutter, and so it basically fucked up my piece. So now I have all this scrap plastic with holes in it that I'm gonna use to make a leaf for my cherry piece. So let's hope this works.
So I'm gonna save you having to watch me do another bit of stitching, but what I have done is I have finished stitching the leaf, giving it some green with the same pattern that I did on the actual cherries. And here I'm just wrapping the wire with the same green thread that I used to stitch, so that there was no weird seam between metal and between the stitching. I'm just correcting the piece again here because it didn't quite fit the sphere perfectly, so I'm just repainting it and adding the same dry brushing that I did as before. And now I have a hand drill, which I thought would be a much better option than an actual drill because the stem is so fragile that I was scared to get an actual drill because I feel like it would crack and shatter. But the hand drill just gave me enough control to make sure that I applied the correct pressure and the hole was small enough for what I wanted to do. So now I'm just fitting in the wire into the stem so that I'm able to put it through the styrofoam and secure it with glue onto the final cherries. So with that, we have reached the conclusion of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and on that smile, here are the final shots.